A mother is often seen as the shield that stands between her child and the world, a protector who would go to any length to keep her child safe. But what happens when that shield becomes the very weapon used to harm the innocent? What could lead a mother to betray the very bond she was meant to protect? This is not just a story of crime, it's a story of manipulation so twisted, so calculated, that it dismantled a family from within. A man enters their lives, seemingly ordinary, building trust and weaving his influence until the unthinkable happens. How does someone convince a mother to turn against her own daughter? Was it control, fear, or something far more insidious? The events of this case shocked everyone who heard of it. A betrayal so profound, it forces us to question how far manipulation can go. This is the haunting account of a boyfriend, a mother, and a daughter whose lives were changed forever. The boyfriend. His name was Mark. To outsiders, he appeared unremarkable, a man in his mid-30s with an easy smile and a knack for saying the right things at the right time. But those who knew him well described a darker side. Mark was a master manipulator with a history of exploiting vulnerabilities. His charm masked a cold, calculating mind, and his past was marked by accusations of control and abuse, though nothing had ever stuck enough to lead to formal charges. He seemed to slip through the cracks of the system, always one step ahead. The mother. Lisa was a single mother in her early 40s, raising her teenage daughter Emily on her own. She worked long hours as a receptionist at a local clinic, juggling the demands of work and parenthood. By all accounts, Lisa adored her daughter, but life had not been easy. Struggling with financial pressures and loneliness, she found herself vulnerable to Mark's advances. When he entered her life, he seemed like a lifeline, someone who could provide the companionship and stability she had been craving. The daughter? Emily, only 14 years old, was described by friends as bright and full of life. She loved drawing and had dreams of becoming an artist. Her bond with her mother was strong, though like any teenager, she yearned for independence. But her world was small, just her school, her mother, and the occasional visit from extended family. When Mark entered their lives, Emily was cautious at first. She sensed something was off, but her voice often went unheard. The family lived in a modest 2-bedroom home on a quiet street. Their neighborhood was the kind of place where people exchanged polite waves but rarely got involved in each other's lives. It was easy for secrets to stay hidden here, for warning signs to go unnoticed. And there were signs, small, subtle at first. Mark's influence over Lisa grew quickly, his opinions taking precedence over hers, his presence overshadowing her decisions. Neighbors would later recall the occasional argument, muffled behind closed doors. Emily's friends noticed her growing withdrawal, her once vibrant sketches now tinged with darker themes. And yet, no one could have predicted the events that would unfold. Mark's control over Lisa deepened, a slow erosion of her independence and judgment. What began as subtle persuasion soon became outright manipulation. He isolated her from friends, convinced her she was alone in the world except for him. And then he turned his attention to Emily. What followed was a calculated descent into horror, a betrayal so profound it would leave a community reeling. How did it come to this? How did Mark manage to twist Lisa's loyalty into a weapon against her own daughter? And why didn't anyone see it coming until it was too late? The relationship dynamics. Mark entered their lives almost by chance, or so it seemed. Lisa had met him at the grocery store, an interaction so casual it barely registered at first. He was polite, helpful, offering to carry her bags when he noticed her struggling. What started as a brief conversation quickly grew into regular encounters. Before long, Mark had found a way to position himself as a fixture in Lisa's life. He was attentive, always knowing the right things to say, always there when she needed someone. Lisa, worn down by years of loneliness and stress, found herself drawn to Mark's charm. He seemed to fill a void she hadn't even realized was so profound. He listened to her worries, offered advice, and gradually became the person she turned to for reassurance. But what Lisa didn't realize was that Mark's attentiveness was calculated. His kindness wasn't genuine. It was a tactic. Mark began isolating Lisa subtly at first. He planted seeds of doubt about her friends and family. Comments like, "They don't really care about you," or "You're better off without their interference," became more frequent. Lisa, already struggling with her self-esteem, began to believe him. Slowly, she withdrew from her usual support systems, relying more and more on Mark. He had woven himself so deeply into her life that his influence over her was almost complete. Mark's attention eventually shifted toward Emily. At first, it seemed harmless. He showed an interest in her drawings, complimented her talent, and even bought her art supplies. But there was an undertone to his behavior, a calculated effort to earn her trust, while simultaneously undermining her sense of safety. Emily, though young, sensed that something wasn't right. She began to notice how Mark would hover when she was alone, how his comments sometimes felt too personal. She confided in her mother, but Lisa dismissed her concerns, insisting that Mark was simply trying to bond with her. "He cares about us," Lisa would say. "You should give him a chance." And so, Emily's voice was silenced. Mark's manipulation of Lisa deepened. He began suggesting that Emily needed more discipline, that her behavior was disrespectful and rebellious. Over time, these comments evolved into something more sinister. Mark started introducing disturbing ideas, framing them as ways to help Emily or strengthen the family bond. Lisa, under Mark's control, began to believe him. Her instincts as a mother, her protective nature, were systematically dismantled. Mark normalized the abnormal through repetition and coercion. He framed his suggestions as logical, even necessary, and Lisa, desperate to keep him in her life, complied. The line between right and wrong became blurred for her, distorted by Mark's relentless psychological manipulation. The events leading to the crime were a culmination of months of grooming, control, and psychological abuse. Mark had gained complete dominance over Lisa's thoughts and actions. She was no longer the woman she once was, a mother who had devoted herself to protecting her child. She had become a puppet in Mark's hands, her will replaced by his. One night, Mark's influence reached its peak. He convinced Lisa to take part in an act so unthinkable, so profoundly wrong, that it would shatter the lives of everyone involved. He framed it as a way to solidify their trust, to prove their loyalty to him and to each other. Lisa, torn between the remnants of her maternal instincts and her desperation to keep Mark, hesitated. But not for long. Under his unrelenting pressure, she agreed. The crime itself was carried out with chilling precision, orchestrated entirely by Mark. Emily, unaware of what was to come, was caught completely off guard. The betrayal by her own mother left her in a state of shock and confusion, unable to comprehend what was happening or why. The aftermath was as calculated as the act itself. Mark coached Lisa on how to conceal what had happened, how to act normal, and how to silence Emily if she tried to speak out. But, despite their efforts, Emily's pain could not be hidden for long. A teacher at her school noticed the changes in her behavior, the withdrawal, the fear, the way she flinched at sudden movements. Concerned, they reported their suspicions, setting into motion the events that would eventually expose the truth. Texts and emails recovered during the investigation revealed the extent of Mark's control over Lisa. One chilling message read, "You have to trust me. This is for us, for our future. Don't let her ruin what we have." Another, "You're stronger than you think, Lisa. Don't let guilt get in the way. It's all in your head." These messages painted a picture of a man who knew exactly how to exploit vulnerability, how to dismantle a person's sense of self and morality. The discovery of these messages, along with Emily's brave testimony, would eventually lead to their arrest. But the damage had already been done. The question remained, how had Mark been allowed to go so far? And why hadn't anyone intervened sooner? It was late on a Friday evening when the crime took place. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the muffled sounds of a television in the background. Emily had retreated to her room, sketching quietly, trying to escape the growing tension in the house. She had noticed the strained looks on her mother's face, the way Mark's voice carried a sharpness that made her uneasy. But she never could have imagined what was coming. Mark had orchestrated everything. His instructions were clear, his demeanor cold and calculated. Lisa, torn apart inside but unable to resist his grip, followed his lead. As they approached Emily's room, her laughter from a show on her laptop came to an abrupt stop when the door creaked open. She turned, her expression a mix of confusion and apprehension. "Mom?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. But Lisa didn't respond. Emily's confusion deepened as she saw Mark step into the room behind her mother. The look in his eyes sent a shiver through her. It was in that moment Emily realized something was horribly wrong. The betrayal that followed was unimaginable. The trust Emily had in her mother was shattered in an instant. replaced by fear and disbelief. She pleaded, her voice trembling, her eyes searching for some sign of the mother who had once protected her. But Lisa, under Mark's control, could not meet her gaze. For Emily, time seemed to stand still, each second stretching into an eternity as her world crumbled around her. The silence that followed the act was deafening. Emily was left in a state of shock, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to process what had just happened. Mark, unfazed, began issuing instructions to Lisa, his voice cold and methodical. "Clean up," he said, as if this were just another routine task. Lisa, numb and trembling, complied, avoiding Emily's gaze as she tried to erase any evidence of what had occurred. Mark's next move was to ensure Emily's silence. He leaned in close, his voice dripping with menace as he whispered threats designed to keep her from speaking out. "If you tell anyone, they won't believe you," he said. "You'll only make things worse for your mother." Emily, overwhelmed by fear and confusion, nodded silently, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. The days that followed were a blur for Emily. She avoided Mark as much as possible, withdrawing further into herself. Her once vibrant sketches were replaced with dark, chaotic scribbles. At school, her teachers noticed the change, but Emily remained silent, too scared to share the truth. Lisa, racked with guilt, tried to comfort her daughter, but her words felt hollow. She was trapped, just as much a victim of Mark's manipulation as Emily, though in a different way. The truth began to unravel thanks to the persistence of those who refused to ignore the signs. Emily's art teacher, who had always been one of her biggest supporters, noticed the drastic shift in her behavior and the darkness in her drawings. Concerned, she reached out to the school counselor, who gently encouraged Emily to open up. At first, Emily resisted, but the counselor's kindness and patience eventually broke through her walls. One afternoon, Emily finally shared her story, her voice barely above a whisper. The counselor, horrified but careful not to alarm her further, contacted Child Protective Services immediately. Law enforcement was brought in, and Emily was taken to a safe location where she could speak freely without fear of retaliation from Mark or Lisa. Investigators began piecing together the events leading up to the crime. They obtained a warrant to search the house, where they discovered chilling evidence. Mark's texts and emails to Lisa painted a picture of a man who had meticulously planned every step, exploiting Lisa's vulnerabilities to gain control over her and Emily. One text read, "Don't let her ruin us. You're stronger than you think." Another, "This is what we need to be a real family." Lisa, confronted with the evidence, broke down during questioning. She confessed to everything, her words a mix of sorrow and regret. "He made me believe I had no choice," she said. "I thought I was protecting her in some twisted way." Her statement, while revealing, only deepened the investigators' understanding of Mark's manipulative tactics. He had isolated her, eroded her confidence, and turned her into an unwitting accomplice. Emily's bravery in recounting her experience was a pivotal moment in the case. Her testimony provided the clarity needed to charge both Mark and Lisa. Though it was painful for her to relive the events, she stood firm, determined to ensure that justice would be served. Her words painted a vivid picture of the psychological and emotional toll she had endured, moving even the most hardened detectives. Emily's testimony, combined with the overwhelming evidence, left no room for doubt. The wheels of justice began turning, bringing Mark's reign of terror to an end. But for Emily, the road to healing was just beginning. Her story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of listening, of recognizing the signs of abuse, and of standing up against those who prey on the vulnerable. How did the legal system respond to the horrors uncovered in this case? And what would justice look like for Emily and her mother? In the next chapter, we'll explore the trial, the verdict, and the lasting impact of this case on everyone involved. Mark's carefully constructed world began to unravel the moment Emily shared her story. Law enforcement, armed with Emily's account and the evidence provided by Child Protective Services, moved quickly. Late one evening, a squad of unmarked cars surrounded the house. The quiet neighborhood was jolted awake as officers approached the front door, their radios crackling softly in the night air. Mark answered, his demeanor calm, his smile practiced. But his confidence faltered when he saw the officers' expressions, resolute, unyielding. They informed him of the charges and placed him under arrest. Lisa, pale and trembling, was led out moments later, her hands shaking as the cuffs clicked into place. Emily, watching from a distance, felt a mix of relief and sadness. The nightmare was ending, but the people she had trusted most were now being taken away. As investigators sifted through the evidence, a clearer picture began to emerge. Mark's manipulation of Lisa was laid bare through text messages, emails, and witness testimonies. His ability to control and exploit was chilling, revealing a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond this family. Old acquaintances came forward, describing Mark as a man who thrived on control, always seeking out those he could dominate. The trial began with heavy media coverage, drawing national attention. The courtroom was packed with journalists, advocates, and concerned citizens eager to see justice served. Emily's testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. She recounted the events with a courage that left the room silent, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "I trusted them," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I thought they were supposed to protect me." Lisa also took the stand, her testimony painting a picture of a woman completely under Mark's control. She described how he had isolated her, convinced her that she was incapable of making decisions on her own, and ultimately coerced her into betraying her own daughter. "He made me believe it was the only way," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I see now how wrong I was, but at the time, I didn't know how to say no." But the most shocking revelations came from Mark himself. In a chilling display of arrogance, he attempted to justify his actions, claiming that he was misunderstood and that everything he did was for the good of the family. His lack of remorse only served to solidify the prosecution's case, painting him as a manipulative predator who saw others as mere tools for his own gratification. Shocking discoveries. During the trial, investigators uncovered a pattern of prior incidents. Mark had targeted vulnerable women before, using similar tactics to isolate and control them. While none of his previous victims had endured what Emily had, their stories painted a clear picture of a man who had spent years perfecting his methods. One woman described how Mark had alienated her from her family, draining her bank account before disappearing without a trace. Another spoke of his relentless psychological abuse, which left her questioning her own sanity. These stories were eerily similar, each one adding another layer to the portrait of a predator who operated with calculated precision. But Emily's case was different. This time, Mark had gone too far, leaving behind evidence that even he couldn't explain away. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom was silent. Mark was found guilty on all charges, including assault, coercion, and child endangerment. The judge, visibly moved by Emily's testimony, handed down the maximum sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lisa, though viewed as both a victim and an accomplice, was also sentenced to 10 years in prison for her role in the crime. The judge acknowledged her manipulation but emphasized her responsibility as a mother to protect her child, no matter the circumstances. For Emily, the sentences brought a measure of closure, but the scars remained. She began the long process of healing, supported by therapists and advocates who worked tirelessly to help her rebuild her life. Her bravery in coming forward became an inspiration to others, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for justice. Public reaction and broader implications. The case sparked outrage and debate across the country. Advocates called for greater awareness of coercive control and the devastating impact it can have on families. Lawmakers introduced new measures to strengthen protections for vulnerable individuals, while educators and counselors emphasized the importance of teaching children how to recognize and report abuse. The public response was a mix of anger, sorrow, and determination. Communities rallied around Emily, offering support and ensuring she would never feel alone again. Her story became a catalyst for change, shining a light on the dark corners of manipulation and abuse that so often go unnoticed. Emily's story is one of pain and betrayal, but it is also a story of resilience and courage. It reminds us of the importance of listening, of standing up against those who seek to control and harm, and of believing survivors when they find the strength to speak out. While the wounds of this case will take time to heal, the lessons it leaves behind will resonate for years to come. The story of this crime is not only one of physical betrayal, but also a harrowing example of psychological manipulation at its most devastating. Mark's methods were disturbingly calculated, designed to exploit the emotional vulnerabilities of those he targeted. He preyed on Lisa's insecurities, her isolation, and her deep-seated fears of abandonment. For predators like Mark, vulnerability is an open door, one they are all too skilled at walking through. Mark didn't start by asking for anything outrageous. His manipulation was gradual, beginning with small, seemingly innocuous requests. These built trust while subtly testing boundaries. Over time, the small asks became larger, more invasive, until Lisa's ability to discern right from wrong was eroded. This gradual erosion is a hallmark of coercive control, a form of psychological abuse where the abuser creates an environment in which their victim feels powerless to resist. Predators often frame their demands as acts of love, loyalty, or protection, further blurring the lines for their victims. Lisa believed she was acting in her family's best interests because Mark had systematically redefined what those interests were. By the time he introduced the horrifying ideas that led to the crime, Lisa's sense of agency and moral clarity had been completely shattered. Emily, too, was a victim of Mark's calculated manipulation. His initial friendliness masked his darker intentions, creating confusion and doubt in her young mind. Predators like Mark thrive in environments where their victims are isolated, uncertain, and dependent, a dynamic he cultivated with chilling precision. The societal factors that enable such crimes. While Mark's actions were abhorrent, this case also highlights broader societal factors that allowed him to operate unchecked. In many communities, issues like coercive control and psychological abuse are poorly understood or outright ignored. Victims often feel ashamed or fear they won't be believed, silencing them before they can seek help. Society's tendency to prioritize appearances over substance plays a role as well. Mark's outward charm and charisma allowed him to mask his true nature. Neighbors described him as helpful and polite, while his victims were left to grapple with the reality behind closed doors. This disconnect between public perception and private truth is a key factor in why cases like this so often go unnoticed. Additionally, systemic issues, such as limited access to mental health resources and support networks, exacerbate the problem. Lisa's isolation made her an easy target, and without a strong support system, she lacked the tools to recognize or resist Mark's manipulation. This is a reminder of the importance of fostering communities where people feel safe reaching out for help without fear of judgment. Systemic failures and missed warning signs. As investigators delved deeper into the case, it became clear that there were warning signs, signs that, if recognized earlier, might have prevented this tragedy. Teachers, neighbors, and even extended family members had noticed subtle changes in Lisa and Emily's behavior. Lisa became more withdrawn, her once friendly demeanor replaced by nervousness and anxiety. Emily, once vibrant and outgoing, grew quiet and reclusive, her art taking on a darker tone. However, these signs were dismissed or overlooked, often attributed to stress or typical teenage behavior. This highlights a critical gap in awareness and education. Many people, even those in caregiving or educational roles, lack the training to identify the red flags of manipulation and abuse. By the time someone does intervene, the damage is often already done. Another systemic failure was the lack of accountability for Mark's past behavior. Despite numerous allegations from former partners, Mark had never faced legal consequences. This pattern of evasion underscores the need for stronger laws and enforcement around coercive control and emotional abuse, ensuring that predators like Mark cannot continue to harm others unchecked. Psychologists and law enforcement officials who examined this case described it as a textbook example of coercive control, a type of abuse that is insidious, difficult to detect, and devastating in its impact. Dr. Amanda Collins, a psychologist specializing in trauma, explained, "The abuser systematically dismantles the victim's sense of self and reality. By the time the victim realizes what's happening, they often feel trapped, believing there's no way out." Law enforcement officials also emphasized the challenges of prosecuting cases involving psychological manipulation. Detective Sarah Monroe, who worked on the case, stated, "The evidence is often subtle, text messages, patterns of behavior, the victim's testimony. It requires a deeper understanding of human psychology to build a case that will stand up in court." Advocates have called for increased training for educators, healthcare workers, and community leaders to recognize the signs of coercive control and intervene early. They stress that education is key, both for preventing abuse and for empowering victims to seek help before it's too late. The case left a profound impact not only on the family involved, but on the broader community. It spurred conversations about the importance of vigilance, empathy, and education. Advocacy groups began pushing for changes in the legal system, including the recognition of coercive control as a prosecutable offense. Schools implemented training programs to help teachers identify and respond to signs of abuse, ensuring that students like Emily would never feel ignored or alone. This story serves as a stark reminder of the damage that unchecked manipulation can cause. It urges us to look closer, to ask questions, and to trust our instincts when something doesn't feel right. Most importantly, it emphasizes the need for systemic change, to ensure that no one else has to endure the pain that Emily and her family experienced. Emily's story is one of survival, courage, and the importance of speaking out. While the scars of her experience will never fully fade, her bravery has brought attention to an issue too often ignored. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a call to action for all of us to do better, to be better, and to ensure that no one suffers in silence. This case leaves us with difficult questions we all need to reflect on. How can we better protect vulnerable individuals from manipulation like this? What steps can we take as a society to recognize the signs earlier and intervene before it's too late? And most importantly, how can we ensure that survivors like Emily have the support they need to heal and rebuild their lives? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your ideas in the comments below. Your voice matters, and together we can bring about change. If you found this story impactful and want to join us as we explore more cases that reveal the complexities of the human experience, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you'll help us shed light on more stories that need to be told. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into another compelling case. Thank you for watching and for being part of a community dedicated to understanding, supporting, and advocating for those who need it most. We'll see you next time. This tragic story reminds us of the devastating power of manipulation and the importance of vigilance. It highlights how predators like Mark can exploit the most vulnerable aspects of our humanity, our need for connection, trust, and belonging. Lisa's journey from loving mother to unwitting accomplice was not the result of one moment, but of a calculated, methodical breakdown of her independence and judgment. Emily's courage in the face of betrayal serves as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but her pain is a reminder of the cost when these crimes go unnoticed for too long. The case also forces us to examine the gaps in our systems, the missed warning signs, the lack of awareness about coercive control, and the societal tendencies to overlook what doesn't fit the surface narrative. Emily and Lisa's story urges us to be vigilant in our relationships, communities, and institutions, ensuring that we do not allow manipulation to fester in the shadows. As we look back on this case, let us not forget the lessons it teaches. It's a call to action for all of us, to educate ourselves, to listen, and to intervene when something feels wrong. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is a chance for justice, for healing, and for change. Thank you for watching and for being part of this important conversation. Remember, understanding these stories is not just about uncovering the past, it's about preventing them from happening again. Together, through awareness and vigilance, we can help protect the most vulnerable among us and create a world where no one feels trapped in silence. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your engagement helps us bring more awareness to stories like this, ensuring that these lessons reach as many people as possible. And if you have thoughts or ideas on how we can better protect others from manipulation and abuse, share them in the comments below. Your voice could make a difference. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time with another story that needs to be told.